What's on, ladies and gentlemen? My name's Ross, I like games, and today we are going to be continuing our look into Keyforge by looking at another house and looking at another theme. We've already looked at Mars and what I like to term cheeky damage. We've already looked at shadows and their stealing embery ways. So I thought we'd have a look at this today and have a look at destroying creatures. There are certain things in Keyforge that have been granted to particular houses to help give them their identity. And one of the things that Dis got, in the breakup so to speak, was destroying creatures. So let's have a look, shall we? Starting off, they've got the action card Dance of Doom. It is an action, and when you play it, you get to nominate a number and destroy each creature with a power equal to that number. Obviously, this can destroy your creatures as well, so you've got to be super careful how you're doing this. But this can be really nice. It can get rid of a pesky creature like Ember Imp that you just want to get off of your opponent's side of the board. Or you can look and go, well, hang on a second, a whole bunch of Mars creatures have a power of 3, so maybe I'm going to nominate 3 and get rid of all of them. It's quite nice. We see Guilty Hearts. Now this is quite nice in that it gives you an Ember bonus when you play it. And when you play it, you destroy each creature with any Ember on it. So obviously in Keyforge, we've got this mechanic whereby creatures can capture Ember and get Ember on it. So here, you just destroy them all. And then, of course, whoever had the Ember originally gets it back when they are destroyed. We also see Hand of Dis, which is a weirdly specific card, which lets you destroy a creature that isn't on a flank. Now, this actually adds a really nice bit of strategy into the game, because my understanding is that at tournaments you get a small period of time to have a look at your opponent's deck list. And generally speaking, being on the flank doesn't make a huge difference. There's the odd card here or there. And this is absolutely one of them. Because if you know that your opponent has Hand of Dis in their deck, you need to make sure that if you've got a creature you really want to protect, you make darn sure it goes on a flank. Now, as we're looking at in this video, Dis have many other ways to destroy creatures, but this one really does add another layer of strategy, which I enjoy very much indeed. Now, we've got Hecatomb here, but Hecatomb doesn't quite count. What you do, you get an Ember bonus, which is awesome. You destroy each Dis creature, and then each player gains 1 Ember for each creature they controlled that was destroyed this way. Really cool, of course, because you can actually take control of one of your opponent's Dis creatures. And actually, Dis has a really good card that can do this, Collar of Subordination. It's a nice little upgrade card that you just put on one of your opponent's creatures and then you control it. Now, obviously, that'll only work if you're playing against Dis, but even so, there's a nice little combo here where you play that down, then you drop a Hecatomb, and you get an extra Ember in the process as well. But essentially, you just destroy each Dis creature and you gain a bunch of Ember. Now, generally speaking, what you really want to do is just play down your Dis creatures, then play Hecatomb, destroy them all, and you get the Ember here whether they're ready or exhausted. It's just got to be your creature. And it is controlled, not owned, which is why the collar thing works. And that's kind of cool. You can use it to clear your opponent's board. If they've got a bunch of Dis creatures out, that is something you can do. But you're giving them a bunch of Embers, so you've got to kind of be careful about that. We also see Free Fates. It's another action card with an Ember bonus, and when you play it, you destroy the 3 most powerful creatures. Now, obviously, this is another one of those that you've got to play extremely carefully. And you'll notice there is a theme here in that a lot of these don't just destroy your opponent's creatures, they destroy all Dis creatures, or the 3 most powerful, or whatever. So you do need to be very careful about when you drop these so you don't end up getting in trouble. Although, as a side note, you actually can use Pit Lord, and Pit Lord's kind of cool in that you get the double Ember bonus and it's a 9 power, yay! But it also forces you to be Dis until it leaves play. So one thing you could do is after using a Pit Lord, when you get bored of it, drop Free Fates. 9 power is a lot. you'll probably get rid of Pit Lord with this. Again, there's no guarantee you get Pit Lord in your deck, but it's nice to throw out some example combos here and there. Free Fates is quite nice, especially if you're in an underpowered deck in terms of your creatures. And there are 3 other creatures that do this, and essentially it's Master of 1, Master of 2, and Master of 3. And they're all basically the same, 4 power creatures. The difference is, Master of 1, when you reap, you can destroy a creature with 1 power. Master of 2, when you reap, you can destroy a creature with 2 power. And Master of 3, when you reap, you may destroy a creature with 3 power. It's going to depend on the deck. It's going to depend on what you're playing against. You may end up with a Master of 1 playing against an opponent that doesn't have any creatures with 1 power. It happens. But still kind of fun, right? Now, there are actually a couple of cards we've got here which will destroy all creatures. That's right. Dis have 2 cards that will destroy all creatures. Yours and your opponent's. Gateway to Dis is a very powerful card, and I've got this in a couple of my decks, and it's very awkward to play it right, but every creature gets destroyed, you gain 3 chains. Now, gaining chains isn't nice because that means you're drawing fewer cards for a couple of turns, and destroying your creatures isn't good, but sometimes you end up in a situation where your opponent has like 8 creatures on board and you just don't. And then, of course, your opponent can either battle to get rid of all of your creatures, or they can reap and just build up a huge stash of Ember. Sometimes your opponent builds up a board presence that is, to be frank, a little bit intimidating. When that happens, Gateway to Dis. It's not the only card they've got to destroy all creatures. They've also got Key to Dis. It is an artifact, and you sacrifice it and destroy each creature. What's really nice about Key to Dis is that it is an Omni ability, meaning you can use this. You've got to play the artifact down when you've Dis House, and you've got to wait a turn for it not to be exhausted. But after that, it being an Omni ability, you can activate this regardless of which active house you've chosen. You can just play it whenever, so you can just keep this on the board and then wait for your opponent to be in a position where they've got a great set of creatures and then use it. Even better because, of course, all these creatures go down exhausted. So if your opponent plays 4 or 5 creatures in one turn, they all go down exhausted, and you can then use Key to Dis to get rid of them. I do actually have a deck that's got Key to Dis and Gateway to Dis. Shall we say I'm not worried about my opponent building up a board full of creatures? Now, they're the ones that destroy, but there are a couple of other ones I want to mention here that are in the same vein. We'll be quick. There are a couple of cards that Dis have got which actually return creatures to your opponent's hand. Fear is an action that just puts 1 creature back into their hand. We've got Hysteria here, which returns each creature to its owner's hand. Yes, that is yours and your opponent's. So you need to be a little bit careful again when you play this. And we've got the creature Snudge. I love that it's some like big demon with a sword and he's called Snudge. He's a 4 power, and when you fight or reap, you return an artifact or flank creature to its owner's hand. And remember, with all of these, when you're putting creatures and artifacts back into your opponent's hand, they can play them straight back down again, just so long as they've chosen that active house, and just so long as they don't mind waiting a turn for it to not be exhausted anymore. And that's the other thing to remember here. You might see that your opponent's got a board set up such that Mars really should be their active house next turn. So if you can get rid of a Logos creature, then you're basically saying to them, look, I know you're not going to be able to put this down next turn, and I find that frankly hilarious. But going back to Snudge specifically, that lets you return a flank creature to your opponent's hand. And then remember, we've got Hand of Dis, which destroys a creature that isn't a flank creature. And if you end up with both of them in one deck, then essentially, if they put it on a flank, you can return it to their hand. If they don't, you can destroy it. And it just means that you can essentially get rid of whichever creature they've got, which is quite nice. And I do want to give a quick shout out here to Life Word. Now again, Life Word does not destroy creatures per se. It is an artifact and it does give you an Ember bonus when you play it. It's got an Omni ability, so you can use it regardless of your active house. You sacrifice it, and then your opponent cannot play creatures on their next turn. I love this because you get an Ember bonus for playing it, and then whenever you want, regardless of your active house, you can be like, hey, do you want to play creatures next turn? It's quite fun. More so fun for you than your opponent. And I couldn't finish this without mentioning a pair of cards, Soul Snatcher and Tolus. You see, both of these grant Ember when creatures are destroyed, but they do so rather differently. So, Soul Snatcher is an artifact, and it reads, each time a creature is destroyed, its owner gains 1 Ember. Now, this creates some very interesting combos, because of course, you've got plenty of cards. I mean, let's just go to Gateway to Dis and Key to Dis, which destroy all creatures, which will essentially destroy all of your creatures, giving you Ember, and destroy your opponent's creatures, giving them Ember. And remember, if you destroy them on your turn, you're giving them Ember going into their turn, and you might end up giving them enough Ember to forge a key, so you've got to be careful. But if you're destroying a lot of your own creatures, this can give you a lot of Ember. But if you destroy a lot of your opponent's creatures, then you give them a lot of Ember. And then weirdly enough, we've got Tolus, which is the opposite. Each time a creature is destroyed, its opponent gains 1 Ember. So essentially, if you destroy your creatures, your opponent gets Ember. And if you destroy theirs, you get Ember. So they're really interesting cards. Bearing in mind, as I've just shown you, this is so good at destroying creatures. It is very interesting that you've got 2 cards, one of which essentially grants you a big bonus if your creatures get destroyed, and one if your opponent. I love that we see this in Dis. I love that they destroy so many creatures. I love that we've got so many little variations, and I love that we've got the pair here which grant all of the Ember. It really opens up some interesting combos. But now, ladies and gentlemen, it's over to you guys. I want to know which of these cards you've got in your decks. I want to know which combos you've found. I want to know what uses you've found for these cards. Go nuts in the comment section, but please do remember the rule. Be nice, would ya? And then make sure you like this video, subscribe to this channel, and follow me on Twitter at the Wossy, where I ramble about stuff, which is awesome. Or at least I think so, but then again, I am a little bit biased. But by far the most important thing, as always, is to look after yourselves until next time. Thank you very much for watching. My name's Ross, and you've been watching Wossy Plays.